And the countdown. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, and today I'm super excited to welcome Matthew F. Jones to the show. Matthew's got a brand new book that just released yesterday, and it's called A Reckoning Up Black Cat Hollow. And I have to tell you, Matthew, you caused me a couple of sleepless nights as I was reading this book. And I don't know if I should be angry with you or if I should be thankful, that I got some great quality entertainment out of it. But regardless, I think you did exactly what you set out to do.
Well,
Welcome to the show.
thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I
Oh,
appreciate
absolutely, absolutely. We've got a lot to talk about today, but I like to start the show with a couple of fun questions just to kind of set the tone for kind of what we're going to do. And one question that I love to ask, it's actually a two-part question. Um, the first part of that question is, what is the best piece of writing advice that you've ever been given by someone, and did you take it? Did you act on it?
it. You know, it's a pretty simple piece of advice,
Yeah.
and I have acted on it, and I've actually repeated it several
Yeah.
times to students and other people.
Yeah.
Um, and the writer who gave it to me, it was, I mean, I hadn't even really started writing, and and I'm trying to remember. Guys, this is terrible, but I'm trying to remember who it was because I was actually, and this sounds funny, but I was actually at a party that my parents had, and I'd never met any writers, and there was a
Yeah.
writer there, and I thought, because I always made up stories in my head. I always thought I was a
Sure.
writer, but I never wrote. So
Sure. Yeah.
I asked it, and Jesus, I'm very sorry that I can't remember his name right now. He's passed. I know that
Yeah.
because. But anyway, I said to him, I said, "Well, what does it take to be a writer? What do you do to become a good writer?" And he looked at me, and he wasn't being facetious or anything. He said, "You write, and you write,
Mm,
and you write," and that's the best advice I ever received because you know uh, you keep people can give you all kinds of tricks and things, and
mhm.
but if you want to be a good writer, the best writer you can be, you just write, and some of it you keep, some of it you don't, but it's all worthwhile. And
Yeah.
so that was the best advice I ever got.
I think there's a and I 100% agree with you that if you want to do the thing, you just got to do the thing.
Yeah,
And maybe this is where we confuse um being a writer with being a published author. They're in essence the same thing, but the second half of that is, you add the commerce side to it. But
right.
it doesn't make you any more or any less a writer just because you have a work published. It's just, you've marketed the thing, but you were still the same writer all along.
That is so true. um, it's when I started writing, with the first book I wrote, I only wrote it because I had been in a bad accident and I really couldn't do anything else. I was living with my girlfriend,
Mhm.
and we lived in a tiny little apartment, third floor apartment. And I, you know, I, I'd always believed I was a writer for some ridiculous reason because I really didn't write.
Yeah.
I would just make up things all the time, and I found characters very interesting. And so, anyway, I started writing on a yellow pad, on a old army trunk we had because we didn't have even have I didn't have a desk up there, and you know I never thought about getting published. The only writer I'd ever met was the guy I told you about,
Yeah.
and so I finished this book in about a year, and I gave it to my wife to read, and or my she's now my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time,
Yeah.
and she really liked it, and she said, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, "I don't know. I just wrote it. If I meet a writer sometime, I'll give it to him." So a month or so, I don't know, a couple months later, actually, I get this thing, a thing in the mail that says, you've been given a scholarship to Squaw Valley Writers Conference in California. And I said, how the hell? And my wife, unbeknownst to me, had sent in a couple of chapters. And so that's how it came about. And I was one of those very fortunate people. I went out there and I met a few, I met my first agent, and that was The Cooter Farm, which is my first novel, and it got published, which is, I know, unusual, but and I had written, when I say hadn't written, I would always write things, like I would see a character and I would write all the time, but not a book, not a story. Just, man, I'd meet a character and I said, that person, man or woman, what if I put them in this situation and give them that, and I just would write fun dialogue or interesting dialogue. And so it wasn't quite accurate to say I'd never written before, but anyway, so that's how it came about.
I have a similar story that I kept talking and I would do the same thing, write little vignettes and things like that. And I was having a conversation with my wife one day, and she said, "You've been threatening to write a novel for years. Would you just hush about it and go do it?" Like, oh, okay.
Sometimes you need that, right?
Right. That's right. So the second part of that opening question is, what is the worst piece of writing advice that you ever received, and did you act upon it?
Yeah. Okay. I got to think about that one, but
these are usually the more fun part of the question.
Yeah, I think I do know what it is, and not everybody would agree that this is bad advice, but it was bad advice for me, and it was from a novelist, and I won't give his name, but because he's a nice guy, and he actually, I met him because after that first novel, and it got optioned for a movie, and he was, he had written me a letter and said, "Geez, whatever." And so I met him, and he'd written some books, and I read one of his books, and I really liked it. And then he'd written some more, and but whatever. We got talking, and he said, because I'd given him another manuscript, and he said, this is. I said, "Yeah, it took me a long time. This one took me a long time because I wanted to get everything just right." And he said, "You're writing every word, every sentence. It's like you spend so much time on it, and it's not. It's really good writing, but you'll find you can skip a lot of that because most people don't read all that. And if you're going to have a career as a commercial writer, you can skip a lot of that." And I thought about that, and I said, "That's just not going to work for me." I love words, and if I can't move from one sentence to the next, and if it all doesn't mean something in my mind, I couldn't do it. So I never told him that, but that was the worst advice I ever got.
Wow. A Reckoning Up Black Cat Hollow is your 7th novel. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
How has your writing process changed over the course of 7 published novels? When you sit down now with a new story idea, because the blank page is the great equalizer, right? Like everybody, it doesn't matter, if you're Stephen King or Matthew Jones or Hank Garner, we all sit down and you have to approach the blank page to start a book. So everyone starts in the same place, but after 7 published novels, critically acclaimed, is your mindset different when you sit down to the blank page? Does the beginning of the story change for you?
Honestly, I really don't think it has much, because unless I see an image and a character, I just can't. I've tried, my agents and editors have said, man, why don't you write a much more commercial book with outlines and stuff.
Yeah,
And so
without all that stuff. Yeah,
yeah, all that stuff. And so I tried, and I said, it just doesn't work for me.
yeah,
I'm very, I need to see, it'll just be one little image or one character.
mhm,
And maybe somebody I've met, and doesn't become that same person, but I need to have that first sentence of what it's going to be. And
mhm,
then and this sometimes gets very difficult, but I've never used outlines or planned out anything. I want to put these people in a situation where they'll reveal to me who they are, and the
yeah,
plot will be revealed through that. And it's always worked for me, but it sometimes takes a lot longer than other times, because it's hard. You really have to. I have this feeling that we really only get to know ourselves when we're in a tight situation,
sure, sure,
and we all think we'll do the right thing, and we all think we'll do this or we'll do that, but we don't know, and
yeah,
that really reveals who we really are. And
right,
so to do that, I try to get into the character's head and let him and put him in a story, or her head or their head. And so that's how I do it. And I think I've always kind of done it that way. I know everybody's different, and that's
yeah.
just kind of my process.
So it sounds to me like you have an image of a character, you think of ways to torture this character, and then see where they go. Which if because in the writing community we love to classify people in camps. Are they a pantser? Are they a plotter? It sounds like I believe most people exist on a spectrum somewhere. They're not all in one camp or the other. But it sounds like you're more to the left side. If we say pantsers are on the left and plotters are on the right, does it seem that you skew more that side?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you mean by pantser writing from um, what
Without
you
a plan, just
without a
by the
plan.
seat of your
Yeah,
pants.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I would say I'm very much that way,
Okay.
because that's what makes writing exciting. The only thing I'll change a little bit is
Yeah.
I don't think I torture all of them, but I do put them in situations
Well,
that
I can. I'm thinking specifically of a Reckoning Up Black Cat Hollow, and you think of some great ways to put them in peril. Let's put it that way.
yeah, no, that I won't argue with that. A lot happened in that book, and
Yeah.
Jack went through a lot. His reckoning
Yeah.
to reach the end. So yeah, yeah, okay, I'll go with that. But get back. What was the original question?
I was just asking, like, would you consider yourself more on the pantser side of the spectrum?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And I started to say, I think that that to me is what makes, uh, you know, well, two things. For me, it's what makes writing exciting and why I want to do it,
Yeah.
because I want to discover what happens to these people, and what happens in the story, and how it comes out. And I don't know that until I'm going sentence to sentence,
Yeah.
and sometimes the words lead you there. It's like I don't know. You're a writer, so maybe it's the same way for you. Everybody's different, but it's almost like music. If the words do
Mhm.
not sound right together, it
Yeah.
just doesn't. It's not going to take you to the next sentence. And
Right.
so and the other thing that it does is it not only makes it exciting, but I don't the kind of writing that I don't like. It just doesn't work for me. Is where things feel contrived, and that
Sure.
and when you do it the way I do it, I think that no matter what else you say, the plots and the stories are not contrived. They just happen, and
Yeah.
so that's how I kind of do it.
I like to say that people exist on a spectrum because I, like you, um, I almost always start with a character, and I'm like, well, who is this person? What is their motivation? And then I usually know where the story's going to end. Like I have a beginning and I have an end. Now I have no idea how these 2 points are going to
Uh-huh.
connect,
Yeah.
and that's where all the magic happens, is getting from point A to point Z, and anything can happen in between. But do you know how the story's going to end, or is it just a surprise to you as literally one sentence after another?
That's an interesting question because almost always I never knew how the end, but with this book, about three quarters through, I got worried about what was going to happen to this one of the people in the book.
Yeah.
And I said, how is this going to happen? And but so I would keep writing, but then a lot of times I would just go back and reread until the thought came to me.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden it struck me, I know how this book is going to end. And so from that, I can go to here. And
Yeah.
so but that's really one of the few times I've ever done that. Usually it just comes to me and, not directly at the end, but,
Yeah.
near the end. So, but that's a good question. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the moment of creation. Like at one point in time, the reckoning does not exist in any form or fashion, and then either Jack Spinks walks onto the stage of your mind, and you're like, well, who are you, Jack? And then a hitchhiker shows up, and you're like, and the things start firing off in your brain. Some One of the most trite questions that I hate to hear interviewers use is, where do you get your ideas from? Because ideas are everywhere.
Yeah.
Like literally they're all around your head. You just have to grab one. But what's really interesting is what makes certain ideas float a little higher than the others. Some are more pregnant with meaning, with possibility. So what is that moment of creation like for you when you're sitting there maybe thinking about nothing, or maybe you observe something across a parking lot when you're at the grocery store, or you read a news article or whatever, and then the what if game starts playing? What's that moment of creation like for you?
Well, I'll tell you, I actually did have a moment of creation for this book,
Yeah.
and it's a weird story, but I'm a
I'm
bike
here for the weird stories.
and I'm a bike rider, and I was in upstate New York where I used to live, and visiting up there, and I was riding up. I grew up in a hollow, and a lot of
Yeah.
people think hollows are just down south, but we have a lot of hollows
Yeah.
in upstate New York. And so I was riding my bike up there, and it was late afternoon. I got a flat tire, so I
Mm.
had to carry my bike all the way down the hollow, and it got dark. And
Ah,
it's a very unusual, very few people drive on that road.
yeah.
So I see these headlights off in the distance, just
Mhm.
heading toward me, but very slowly. And that just started something in my mind. And actually, the person was very nice. When they eventually they stopped, and
Yeah.
they said, they had the truck. He's put the bike in the back, but it was that moment before that, because it seemed like it took forever for the guy to come, and I'm thinking, what the hell is he doing up here? Uh,
Mhm.
and the next day that I sat down, I didn't have I just sat down to the computer, and a lot of times you just fool around. And
Yeah.
when I sat down, that uh, the driver of the truck, Jack Spinks, came to me, and then the girl who was, I guess, would have been me, but I,
Mm.
see somebody off the
Right.
road, and so that moment started it for me right there.
Wow. And there's of all the emotions, fear is fuels creativity in ways that other things don't. We can
Mhm.
have a moment of love and passion just pouring out, contrasted with a moment of not knowing what's going to happen, and that adrenaline starts rising, and your eyes are shifting all over the place, and something about that just makes those synapses fire like nothing else. It's crazy.
I agree with that. And the other thing that it does, and I try to, I think this is also a lot to do with revealing true character, who people really are,
Yeah.
is you're in those situations where you're afraid and whatever things are happening, and your reaction, you react instead of think. And I think, reactions are really important because it's thinking,
Yeah.
but you don't realize it's thinking. And this is what I would do. This is how I react. And I always find that intriguing, to see how people will react in certain situations. And fear, as you say, is a great motivator for that.
Yeah, it sure is. Um, some other writers, our friends on the other side of the spectrum, on the plotter side, will say things like, to really craft a tense plot, you need to plan it out ahead of time so that you know where the twists come and go, and all of that. Um, and then, and which sounds good. Um, unless you're the kind of writer that doesn't write that way, and then you're like, well, that, you're kind of taking all the surprise out of it. And so, as someone who really crafts intricate plots, and you really depend on, this is going to sound worse than I mean it, like manipulating the reader's emotions, like that's a critical part of a book like A Reckoning of Black Cat Hollow. um how do you, as a pantser, how do you ensure that the story stays tight, that you're giving twists and clues and all of that stuff in the proper time? um is that a result of the editing phase that comes after the first draft? Like is there, are you thinking these things as you're writing? I know that you said word choice is extremely important to you. It needs to flow like music,
Mhm.
um, to paraphrase what you said. But how does the plot and these things that feel plotted out after the point, even though they weren't in the writing? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing for me is, and this is another odd sounding piece of advice that I sometimes have used to tell, people, the students who ask, or people would ask, is, and it's probably not true for most people, but maybe I write a little bit differently than some people. But the worst thing I can do as a writer is think. It's like I get into a different place, and you're in somebody else's head, and you're just following them, and the words flow. And I think every one of us is a story with a plot. And so you
Sure.
just need to know that person well enough to know, and then put them in a situation where the plot is interesting and the story is going someplace that's of interest to you and that means something. And so I try to get into the character's head as much as I can, which sometimes takes you to dark places and so forth.
Yeah.
But you're right about the editing process, though. I
Hmm.
mean, it's never done. You go back and you say,
Right.
well, there's too much there, or there's not enough there. I have to hone that. I have to fix this. And sometimes you rewrite a whole section because, yeah, the idea is there, but it's just not quite right. And editing is like, I
Hmm.
always think of it as combing your hair. I used to have a lot more of it than I do, but it's
I used to have any at all. Yeah.
well, we're in the same boat there.
Yeah.
But it's like combing your hair, getting the snarls out. You keep doing it and
Yeah.
doing it and doing it. And so that's part of it. Yeah.
Well,
Is
I can never remember who to attribute it to, but what the old saying is, writing is rewriting.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. I mean, anybody who thinks, "Oh, I've written this yesterday," then they go back the next. I mean, you know this. You write something, man. I'm really quite happy with that. You go back and go, Jesus, that just doesn't work. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot of rewriting.
Yeah. Um, I want to touch for a moment. You talked about the importance of knowing your characters so that you're in their head, following them along, and their life is a plot. So how do you get to know your characters? Do you do any pre-writing exercises to kind of flesh out who this character is, to figure out who they are. One thing I like to do is I'll get an idea for a character and I'll just write 3 or 4 pages of just kind of their daily life and just kind of figure out who they are. Do you have any rituals like that or any things you
Yeah,
rely upon?
a little bit, yeah. Because to me, I love dialogue, and I think
Yeah,
dialogue really tells you a lot about people, how they,
sure.
how they talk and what they say.
Right.
And so I sometimes just write pages and pages of, I'll put the character I'm writing about in with one person and another person situation,
Hmm.
and they just talk, nothing else. They're just talking, and you, through what they're saying and how they're saying it, you might put a few things in, what they look like when they were saying it, or what they were looking at, or whatever. And that's sort of like, to me, is a sort of a channel into their thinking and into their head, and that gets me where I get to know them a little bit more, so that when I'm writing, I don't have to think about what they'll say, because I already know what their personality is, and how they would react to those things. If that makes any sense, I don't know if it does.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It in a Reckoning Up Black Cat Hollow, we kind of know how what the setup of the story is, and it's on the jacket copy. That
Right.
Jack Spink's driving a truck, picks up a hitchhiker. She grabs the wheel of the truck, and it things go haywire real quick. Um, what can you tell the audience who have not read the book yet, like I have, of what they can expect in this book, and what are some of the surprises that, and you don't have to give away the surprise, but maybe set up what is that you're most proud of in this book?
Uh, well, I think I'm proud of the way Jack came through this journey, which was
Yeah.
a quite a journey. And because it's not, it all takes place in one night, the story,
Right.
but it's really, as he said, 4 years happening in 8 hours or whatever,
Right.
because there's a lot of flashbacks to his time in Afghanistan, and a situation that he had there, with someone who, had fallen into a well, but the
Hmm.
conversations they had, what that revealed about his wife and his daughter. And he was a very tortured guy, at the
Hmm.
beginning of this book, and he was kind of still a little, but I think that's what the reckoning is. It wasn't so much, um, it was more of a reckoning of all the things that in his mind, because his life had sort of stopped, and he had, and and also, uh, the girl, who we don't even know her name until
Hmm.
later in the story.
Right.
She intrigued me a great deal, what her story was, and how Jack, every every girl of a certain age that Jack saw, he saw his daughter in. And so there was some surreal moments where you don't really know whether he's seeing real people or not.
Hmm.
And that, I think, that adds to the eeriness and the, as you said, the frightening part of it a little bit. Uh, he's a tortured guy, and but he's a good guy, and I hope that comes through. And so that's what I was most proud of, is that he he came through this a hell of a journey, and a lot of
Yeah.
things, because there were a lot of other people in there that, he had to deal with in situations. So
I
yeah.
I loved the compressed time that this book takes place in. I published a book in the fall called Crossroad Blues, and it's about a man who picks up a hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker had made a deal with the devil at the Delta Crossroads of legend, of Robert Johnson legend.
Yeah, yeah.
And the whole book takes place in the cab of this pickup truck as these two are going down the highway. And it's very compressed. The camera's very tight on these two people, and conversation going back and forth and flashbacks. And there's just something dynamic that happens when you pull the camera in that close and you confine the story to a particular time, and you only have so much to play with here. That the what I found is the more restrictions and constrictions you put on the story, the more opportunities open up, which was counterintuitive. Do you find things like that, like the more limitations you put on yourself, or you just kind of remove the opportunity for the story to just go anywhere? That interesting that things happen. I found out. What about you?
Yeah, I call it claustrophobic writing.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and you want to keep it, and it. I find that to be a very effective way, because if you're in a situation, a tight situation with
Hmm.
a couple of people, or more than that, but you keep the focus narrow, it
Hmm.
always is going to widen out, because it, people's minds are going to take you someplace, and
Right.
everybody has other stories. They have side stories. So why am I the way I am now? Well, this happened, that happened, and so you go off on a flashback or whatever it is, and you learn more about these people. And so I like the idea that you really don't know this person at all, or these people at all, at the beginning of the book, and you get to know them through those things as we move on. So yeah, I agree with you, and I like the compressed kind of writing. And I just think it I look at all of my books in one sense as character studies, because
Right.
and that's how you get to know people. So yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Um, the hold on one second. I'm trying to get a screen shared here. A Reckoning at Black Cat Hollow is available everywhere now. And it came out yesterday, and I love this book so much, Matthew. I know it's only January 28th, but I feel like it's one of my favorite books of the year so far. And it's going to
Thank
take
you.
a lot to knock that off the top 10 list for 2026. We're going to put links to it in the show notes for make it easy for folks to find it. If you've got a great local bookstore, support local books. Go pick up this book today. If you don't have a good local bookstore, we'll have a link to it in the show notes where you can grab it. Matthew, if people are just discovering you, want to dig into all the stuff that you're up to, dig into your back catalog, all that stuff, is there a good place for people to follow you online?
Yeah, I have a website, matthewfjones.com. And then I'm also on, this is all new for me, Facebook and Twitter, or not Twitter, Instagram,
Whatever it's called these days. Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, Instagram, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I have accounts on there. I think it's, Matthew Jones writer, or something like that. And then
Yeah.
Facebook is just my name. So I think if you're looking up, but go to the website, and they're all on there.
Perfect.
Um,
Perfect.
yeah.
We'll link that up as well.
Okay.
Matthew, we wish you much success on the new book, and thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.